Hi everyone. Can everyone hear me? We have a few people in the room. I think we could probably get started. Uh, Sorry for being a little bit late. But welcome to our Decisions Daily Lunch and Learn on Thursday, November 16th. Hope everyone's having a great day. Before we get into any questions or going over some reporting, just go through a few of our bulletins here. So I'm sure everyone's kind of seen this. The decisions end of life support for V6 has already gone through. If you have any questions about this, please reach out to our support team or your customer service representative to fix anything or to upgrade if you need to. Also, I'm not sure if everyone joined today, but before this meeting, we had our product roadmap sort of webinar where we kind of go into what we plan on delivering in decisions for the platform. I hope everyone was able to join that. We will be having another one in 2 weeks. So please put that on your calendars when you get a chance to. So let me exit out of here. So it looks like we did have some questions. Oh, it did get canceled. Sorry about that, Eric, Alex. I didn't know it was canceled today. I'll get some more information on when the next one will be to give you a date for that. But thanks for that heads up. So let me exit out of here and kind of get into a studio. We did have a few questions that came in before our webinar started or our lunch and learn started. And let me just make sure, Alex, yeah, you are in here. You had a few questions around data grids and data repeaters. And we could go through those three you had. And your first one was sort of kind of breaking down really what's the difference between the two. Let me just so you could get into here too. Alex, I allowed should be able to talk while we go through these questions as well. Hi,
Thank you.
Alex.
Hi. Thank you so much for doing this. It's really appreciated.
Of course, of
I,
course.
frankly, it's just to understand what
Mm-hmm.
are the use cases for each of the two controls.
Yep.
When should you use one and not the other,
Mm-hmm.
right? I realized that the way you configure and the way you feed data to each is different.
Yes.
But in the end, from a user perspective, it may not be that different. And I have the feeling that the data repeater allows me to have a little bit more configuration, like putting buttons in the.
Absolutely. Yes.
So that's
Yes.
what. Oh, that's it. Oh, and
Okay.
one more
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Trying to configure. Sorry, when I was trying to configure a data grid in the simple form, the new style
Mm-hmm.
form, I could not get the report to work. I couldn't see anything.
Okay.
Where if I create a report from scratch, it does show the data.
Understood. Okay. So, cool. All right. Well, let's start with really the differences, and you're spot on. The biggest difference between the two is mostly UI. So I kind of made just a simple example here for a simple form. And if I just exit out of here, we could see what they both look like. You're absolutely right. Biggest difference is with the data grid. we kind of get the view of a normal like a report, or kind of like what you would see in like the studio in terms of like normal report viewers that we would make, or even just like in the UI for decisions. Kind of just looks like a normal report that we would see. And then the data repeater, like you were saying, allows us to just have a little bit more um I guess customization in how we want to display that same data. So above and below, we're kind of just seeing account ID and email address on our data grid. And below, we are seeing that same information just on a data repeater. Just made a very simple one with a label and a text box to show what was entered in for that variable. But you're absolutely right. So the biggest thing is UI. UI is really the biggest difference between the two. There are small differences as well in some configuration. So for a data grid, you are able to show actions. So if I were to click this, and I'll save this, and we'll go back to that preview. Data repeaters do not have that capability. So if I go back, let me just make sure if this would be set up correctly. If I just turn that on, okay, we might have to do a little bit more configuration around that, but allowing the actions gives the user the ability, just like normal reports, to right click on the record and run some type of flow or some type of action if needed. But again, those are really the two differences, but mainly the biggest difference is UI. You had your second question was about how this is implemented differently in a simple form versus normal form. They're pretty similar. The only difference is that if I were to run this, and debug this, I think I should have. The biggest difference is a little bit of the UI changes as well. So this looks a little bit different. This is the data grid on a normal form. And really for the data repeater, I didn't create one, but the main difference there is on the simple form, your the record form for each one of the records in a data repeater. This is built out by using a simple form. On the normal form, when you create the data repeater, it will be built out on a normal form that will be used for that data repeater. So if I just drag one in, that's really the main difference. They both pretty much act the same way, but if I go into here and pick a source and create new, this repeater control is just going to be a version of a normal form and not a simple form. And then you had, well, okay, before we continue, were there any questions around those two? So those are really the two main differences. I guess in terms of use case, I would say when you're processing, so both of these can do almost the same thing. I have it here in the example, being able to add an item to the grid, being able to add an item to the repeater. So technically both can add new rows to the components. You're able to enter in that information as well if you need to. You also have the same ability to remove a record from those components. But in terms of use case, it's just the UI. I think a lot of it's just the UI and the preference of how you would want to enter information for a new record or for editing that record. But you could really get away, or each one can do the same process. It's just which one would you rather the visually, which one would you rather use? And oh, go ahead.
No, I'm wondering, wouldn't it be simpler for the developers to merge these two controls into one? Because if you can do basically the same things,
Mm-hmm.
right? The only thing that, and say, for example, the data repeater gives you a little bit more flexibility over the location of your widgets inside the, the row,
Mm-hmm.
okay? Which, by the way, I suggest to call it a row instead of a data controller, because a data controller means little. A row, when you're looking at a list of things, means something more. And the only thing that you should add probably to the data repeater is the ability to add actions on left click, right? Oh, sorry, on right click on
Yeah.
the row itself, right? And then you can do away with the confusion, the explanation of, why do I have two? Which one should I use when?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, just a suggestion.
Yeah. Well, we'll definitely take that in account. Um, there's I don't have any examples of it. I'm sure you've seen. Well, okay, so your idea is that instead of like deprecating the data grid,
Or the other way
um,
around. I don't
or the
care.
other way, yeah.
Because I like, for example, the ability of the
Mhm.
data grid of multi-selection, which
Yep.
doing with data grid would be complex at best.
Mhm.
But I like also the ability to put, a delete icon, like a little trash can
On
or
yeah,
a
on the actual yeah,
the actual row, which I cannot
on
do
the
with
actual
a
row. Mhm.
data grid, right?
No, understood. Yeah, we'll definitely take that into account. There is just one is rigid and the other is more customizable, but they
Mhm.
almost pretty much are able to execute the same function, maybe in different ways. Like your action for delete would be on a right click here, but you could have a delete button like you were saying here. Um, so they're pretty much the same, like you're saying.
Okay. And by the way, when you do an action like an edit or a delete, do you have to refresh the list of things you've done here or not?
Yes, you would want to refresh that list. So with those actions, maybe I could get more information for you. I'm sure we have a document on that for getting the actions on to our events data grid. I'll look for that after our meeting. But yes, the way that those actions work is that they're sort of like the configuration actions that you would have on like a simple database structure or an entity, which kind of runs a flow outside of the form in a way. So say you had like CRUD actions for editing, right? And if you made a change through that action, it would need to be refreshed on this form here. But what I'll do is get some more information about that on the active form, or not on the advanced data grid side, so you could kind of look into those actions as well.
Thank you. Much appreciated. Oh,
Of
one last
course.
thing on this. Is there an easy way to number the rows? Like what you did there, the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Can you do the same? I don't know how you did that, by the way, but
So I did not configure that. It should be up there by default, unless there's some way we were able to take it off. The only changes I made was making this a multi-select.
mhm.
Um, and is there one more thing? No, that was it. So the only thing I did was just change that to a multi-select.
Can you edit, where it says source um, in the properties? If you move the cursor down, there is a source area, and then
Source.
go down, down, down.
Oh yeah,
There.
yeah. Yep.
That isn't that probably from where the number comes?
It could be. So this is the advanced data grid, right? So with advanced data grids, we're sort of, or we are creating a report. It could be in here. I would have to drill down into this, but in terms of me adding those numbers, I did not add those. I did not change this report in any way to add those numbers. They should be up there by default.
Here. So by the way, this is the what I thought is the problem that I had, but it's definitely
Mhm.
not. I stopped looking at it because I saw that I did not see any rows in this report, even
Oh yeah,
though I
yeah.
view, but that is the default. I should not see anything.
Yes, this is the default because it technically doesn't have any data to show, right? We haven't inputted anything. This is different from, say, me
Normal.
creating a report, right? A regular report, where the reporting data is there already, right? Or it's already fetching that data for us to view. So if I just create a report real quick, you're absolutely right. I'd
I should
turn
do
this to count source data, and I just add ID. So this is different, right? So on a normal report, it's already fetching the data. But on a active form, or not on a advanced data grid,
doesn't.
this really could be anything, right? This could be anything. And it's not fetching that information for us to digest yet until we
Okay.
actually run it.
And can you bring data from other uh, data sources in the data grid report? So I see that you are using just one, right? The account,
Mhm.
but say that if you wanted to put, I don't know, roles, can you add another one? No, right? It's only one data structure.
Yes, correct.
Okay, that is probably a bit of a difference with the data grid, sorry, the data repeater, where you can construct your list outside anyway and feed it to the widget.
So with
Right?
the even with the data repeater though, you are still so if I click onto the data repeater and go to edit source, right? And if you go to the properties, you are still picking an
Yeah,
input type.
yeah.
So I'm still picking account here, and this is what this form or what this repeater is expecting to take in. You could create your own structures, right? You could create a structure that's combining, two, and have that as your input. But that would
But then,
still work the same way as the data grid as well. You just have to pick that type, a new
got it.
type.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Thank you so much.
Of course. Any more questions around this too? I hope those were good enough examples. Pretty simple examples. If you run into any issues, you said you um oh, okay, the issue of not seeing the data was the issue, right? But it should work if you run it.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Cool. We also had another submitted question. Um, and it was around sort of the same thing. Let me find that. That was around more advanced data grids and active form flows. Let me. I just wanted to get some validation on this question. Um, so, for example, are you trying to add a advanced data grid inside of active form flow, or are you trying to use an active form flow to update advanced data grid?
Um, hey, good morning. Yeah, it's the second option. So basically, we have a normal form where we have
Okay.
yeah, advanced data grid, and I'm trying to use the active form flow to actually modify the data inside of the
Mhm.
data grid.
Okay, got it. Understood. So in that case, so really the data grid should be the same, but let's just create I'll do a advanced data grid. This. Is this on a simple form or a normal form? You said mobile form, right?
Normal, I believe. Yeah.
Normal. Okay. Oh, we'll work with the normal then. So let me kind of just set up this sort of same thing. Count. And we want to, let's just put account ID and email. Now, so we have our advanced data grid. This is, we have to make sure we could do input only. I'm going to make it single select. So really the difference here is if it's info only, we're not really able to access any of that data. Single select has an output that we could leverage. But
yeah, for me, actually, the struggle is to kind of access the current data in the form without actually having any output. So, like, yeah, you have a data in the data grid. You don't select anything, let's say, and you want to read the data from the data grid, let's say, within the active form flow, and maybe modify them. So basically, modify the input for the advanced data grid within the active form flow.
Okay, so you want to, so the expectation here, so with the data grid, right? The data grid on the form is going to show you the records. So I just want to get a better idea. When you want, say your example of editing the record in the data grid, right? Your expectation there is clicking a button to edit, right? Are you editing that single item, or are you viewing
actually
that single record?
Actually, ideally, as I provide in the question, you have two data grids. You basically move first row from one advanced data grid to the other one without marking it, without doing anything about that row. So basically, within the active form flow, you pick first item, first row, from the pretty much the input, no, the output from the grid, and you don't pick it. I mean, it's just an example, but you don't do anything on the grid itself. So you don't mark any item. You don't. Yeah.
Okay.
So
let's try to build that out real quick. I'll make another one here. Let's just say data grid 1, 2. This is going to be account as well. Accounts 2.
And can you make it like multi selection or something? The first one, if it's possible.
The first one, yeah.
I mean, maybe it doesn't matter in this use case, but yeah, just.
So like, I'm going to make it like you were referencing on your initial reference was saying, like, we're not really interfacing with these. We're clicking on the active form flow to view the report again and then move the items that we want to move. Am I getting that correct?
Yeah.
Okay. So I'll just keep this single select for now. But let's look at this. So we have our two data grids, right? One with we'll have all of our accounts, and say our account 2 that will just be empty at an initial open. So one thing to note, and the biggest thing to note, is with active form flows, you cannot put a form in an active form flow. So active form flows will consider that as I believe the error is like cannot have synchronous steps in the form. So because we can't do that in the active form flow, what we're going to want to use is a sub dialog button. sub dialog button allows us to run a flow that displays a form, right? And then in that form, we could do, we could show the list of accounts, right? And be able to pick them and then move that data into, whatever grid we would want to. So we could build that out real quick. Oh, go ahead.
Actually, that this is not what I really wanted to achieve. And sorry for confusion. And in this case, when you have this particular form as you have it now designed with these advanced data grids, that's enough. Now I would expect a button which would trigger some event, and basically the first row from the top grid 1, would be moved to grid 2. That's all.
Okay, yeah, that will be a little bit simpler. And for that case, we will be able to use active form flow, right? So what we would want to do here, right, is we need something to we need a button, right? We need some type of action to let us know when to run that, right? So if I just put a button, let's use an event button. And I'll put that here. Rise event. Say move selected groups. And your case here too is multi-select, right? So let's say selected accounts. So we have our input here, and then we have our input for this bottom grid here. Just remove that. So we have the buttons. Now we just need to create the flow to do that. So I'm going to create that active form flow. And let me just make this a lot easier for me and make sure I'm naming these appropriately. Accounts. And this is accounts too. And that's the event button. Okay. So let's now create our active form flow. And we'll just call this move accounts to bottom. Grid. And then moving them down, does that mean, we could do it both ways. I'm just going to move them, create a copy and just move them to the bottom. But we can remove them from the top grid and move them to the second grid as well. That's also possible. So I want this to trigger on the user clicking on the event button. We don't need to run this at start. And let's just edit the flow. And just a best practice thing here, when you're creating active form flows, the default name for it is rule flow. And once you're creating many of these, rule flow will show up in a few places, but hidden. So just to make it a little bit easier on, when we're pushing items either through manual import, export, or through the repository, it's good to kind of just rename these in the info section with what you have entered in the previous dialogue. It just makes it a little bit more cleaner and just makes it a lot easier for us to move these items over into, say, UAT or production. So from here, we now have two things. We have the items that user is selected, and then moving those items into the second data grid. So for us to do that, really, if we're just moving the items and not deleting them, we just need one step here. If we go to our form rules and we set control value, we'll go into here, go into our form data. We have our accounts to advanced data grid. And then so this first one here is the input. This is the input to that data grid. So I want to first select the form control. select the form control. And then from here, it's going to ask us for two things. The list of the accounts, and we're going to get that from what is selected on the first data grid. So selected accounts, and we know this is a string, or not string, a list of these selected accounts. And then
just sorry to interrupt. Just keep in mind there will be nothing selected really. It's just a top one row, let's say, or top one rows in that case. So there will be no particular output, let's say, from the selection. Even though it's a multi-selector, but there will be nothing selected. I mean, it's just about addressing, I don't know, top one item, top 5 items, whatever. I mean, just an example, but I basically wanted to address, as mentioned, kind of input data instead of output data, basically, because the output will be empty.
Yeah, but like in the case of the example, so we have those two data grids, right? You're saying the user is not going to be selecting anything to move down to the bottom grid.
It will be the first row, basically.
So you're just saying, okay, we're just whatever is selected in the first row, just move to the bottom.
Just
or
the
first row in that list.
First row in that list, yes.
Okay, so we could still do that. If that's not selected, we should still be able to. So this is expecting a list of accounts, right? So instead of select from flow, let's build the array, right? So we're expecting the users not selecting the item, right? We just want to move the first item in that list over to the bottom, right? So if I click on the form data and then our accounts here, we should be able to use the same variable here from accounts. And if we go to the very bottom, there's first account. And then we could leave the selected item null. There's no needed for that. And that should be it. So that's not even considering what is selected there. This is only considering whatever is the first item in that list. So with that made, we know we don't want this to run at startup. We have our event button. It's going to run on the event button when the user clicks it. And we could click OK on this, and let's save this and run this in the debugger. Let's move our list of accounts here. Just make sure our input here. We know this bottom one should be empty at initial start. And let's see if that all worked out. Okay, so we have our two data grids, right? Nothing selected on the top. It is multi-select. And hopefully, if I click on this button, this should add it to the bottom. And it didn't. Where did we go wrong? Selected item should be selected item. Go back into here.
Basically, this is what I'm struggling with. I cannot really address in any way, or I couldn't find a way, and I spent a few hours on that topic already.
Got it.
How
so
to
it's
address these input data
without this selection. Yeah. So form control accounts 2, data grid here, and our input here should be from the first. No, you're right. There might be an issue around here. We created an example. I will go over this with the team to make sure if this is expected behavior or not. But like you're saying, what we see here is that I'm not picking anything from the selected, right? I'm just picking from the original list that is above. Let me just make sure I'm picking all the right ones. Yeah, this is the control for the first one. The count should be what the input is to that form control, and even picking the first should work. Let's just look at this real quick too. Just make sure.
I kind of also try to actually use the component which is like get control value, I think it's called, instead of set control value, and basically pick the data or get the data using that component, which would kind of make sense. But yeah, for me, it's also kind of empty. Basically, when I select the input for the data grid, basically, then it doesn't return any value, or it does return some value, but not really value from the data grid itself.
Got it. Understood. Okay. Let me just make sure this is working as expected if one to be selected. So that's not taking in anything. That's two. Even this is still not showing too. Okay. Pretty sure it did. It's a good check though. I will check that and see. Thank you. You're right. Sorry about that. We didn't finish completing this. Let's go back into that active form flow. Let's just set it up how we had it before, just in case. Not selected. Counts first. Getting the data from there. But we were seeing in the debugger that still wasn't really working, even with this setup. Let's just make sure. Yep, even in that case, it's not showing it. Not getting information from that input. Okay, so that's still not. So that's the thing we're going to check if that's expected. But just to make sure, let's give this a selection. Okay, so that's sort of working. Oh yeah, I'm only doing the, no, it should be the whole list. Selected. Just need to refresh. What does that? Okay, so I see your issue. Issue here is that the input to that data is not showing up with that selection. We have an example of it, so I will go over this with the team to make sure if that's anything expected. But it looks like it should be a DT, that information should be accessible from how we had it set up. And is that how you were setting that up as well?
Yes.
I guess
Yeah,
in terms of our like simple test here. I go back into here. You're trying to set the control to this list as say the original, not selected, but sort of like even this case, we could try to do this, and we should expect this to just take in that input, that list that's currently on that struct on that data grid, and just add it to the bottom. Let's just confirm that one more time. Yep, it is not grabbing it. And then someone, you said you were using the get control value and that wasn't working as well.
Yeah, I tried that.
Mm-hmm. Just validate that real quick. So we could have in our test for our team as well. Form rules, get control value. Here first. Here. That's outputting that. Let's just see. Counts come in. I'll not save that. Back to here. Save that. It's not reflecting in the debugger. Count. Be there. Save this. And okay. So something is not reflecting on that change, so I'll have to look into that too. But still the same issue. We're not able to get that data without selecting it. Okay.
And maybe a side question, as I was trying to kind of find a workaround, is there a way how you can basically pass data from the, let's say, form itself, or like the form input data into the active form flow? Because I was thinking to create some, create data of the same data type and or the same data structure, pass the data in some way into that variable, and then reuse it maybe within the active form flow, and then basically update the components using this data set. But I couldn't find a way actually how to actually pass the data from the kind of
So
not from the form components, but from the, let's say, form input or the flow itself, and how to pass it into active form flow. So,
yep. So what should be able to do is here save. So we have given inputs here. I just created one for account 3, so we know it's not getting confused with the others. So if I exit out of here, we should see account 3 here, right? If I take the entity results, add it to account 3, go back into that form, we should expect to see that as an input for our active form flow. Here. And I go to now we could see it here. So there's the form input data, right? And we see account 3 here. So if I try to run that, I'm not sure why this new step's not being reflected in the debugger, but let's just see if that actually runs what we expect it to run. Yeah, it's still running the older version of this. Okay. But that's how to add the input to it. If you go into the form, there's a section up here where you could click on edit, add that input variable, and you'll have access to it inside the active form flow.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks. I'll double check that because for some reason I couldn't see it. But yeah, I'll double check that. Thank you very much.
Yep. I will take this back to the team as well. This sort of seems to me, it seems like a DT that data should be available even though it's not selected. So we'll get back to you on that to make sure what the fix around that will be.
Okay, great. Thanks a lot.
Of course. We are at the mark. We have any more questions come in? Oh, I see, Nancy, you did have a question. If you wanted to go over that real quick, I'm not sure if we. Can you hear me, Nancy? You there?
Yes. Can you hear?
Yep. So you had a question around calculating dates. Going through it now.
So I've got it set up to where I have a location, I have the workday and the hours and all that. And I want to calculate, I want to determine, say, the business date 2 days out. And I can do that, but I'm getting it to where it's falling, 2 days from now, and it's giving me, I'm getting Saturday. And I want to make sure that it's not, Saturday's not a working day on my calendar.
Oh, I see. And the steps that we're using is I think it's like compute business time for location.
Yes. Or I think I've used get business days between dates for location. So tried a couple of different things. So I wanted to get
let me
something I'm missing.
Compute business time. Oh, that's the one we have. Get business days between dates for location. Okay. And the issue here is that with your location, you have your location set up to not have Saturdays as working days, right?
Right. Think of it as a normal, the normal calendar. We don't work, let's just say 9 to 5 and not Saturdays and Sundays, and we get holidays, right?
Okay. And I'm assuming this is on the latest version. Or a later version.
Yes.
8 something. Okay.
Yeah.
So it sounds like you have it set up right. I don't know if you're able to I don't think we're able to share screens anymore. This might be a topic outside of Lunch and Learn, but we could definitely go over that. It sounds like you have everything right. Maybe I would assume we would get an issue if location name was wrong, because it's really for these, this is a constant. You're just putting in the location name.
Yeah, no,
Are you
I've got all
are you
that.
getting okay? You're getting location
Yeah,
names. Okay, so that's being inputted incorrectly. It's just it's not reflecting what you have set up for that location. So
right. So, well,
got it.
no, it gets all that. It gets all that. So I
Mm-hmm.
calculate it, I determine, you know, I go through a process, but like if I said, so in the location, like if you use the default location that you have in your system, right? I think
Mm-hmm.
it's probably called default. And if you set that to a non-working day, or Saturdays for non-working day.
Let's see if we could set this up real quick. Let's save.
And it's under system data.
Locations. Let's just add a new one.
And then, yeah, check.
I'm just gonna do Monday. Let's make it to where we know it's gonna be working or not working. So Monday. Let's change that. That should be fine.
I'm not sure if, can you go back and set that? I feel like you need to kind of see it with a regular Monday through Friday. I don't know if that's really a realistic kind of example that you're gonna get, because there's only
Oh
one
yeah.
working day.
I just want to make sure this works appropriately.
Okay.
And then I'll do that to see if we see any differences between those two. I just want to make sure that step is actually calculating. I would expect us to just give us another Monday. If that's correct, I'll do what you have is Monday through Friday is what you have in your example. Let's just do constant here, location name. Constant. And the start would be current date. So if this is one day, this should be giving us skipping this current Monday or the 20th and then going to the 27th. So this looks like that's working as expected. And then on your use case, I edit this. You have it set up for Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday.
Yeah, normal. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And
then the setup on here. So if we try to force a weekend.
Well, I want to get, so in that, I want to get the, I want to compute the next business. I'm going to compute based on it's like the second business day.
On the second business. Can you give me like a example in terms of the dates? So like
so if today's the Thursday, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then so if I put in an assignment and I want it to be due in 2 business days.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't want that day to be calculated on a
Friday, on Saturday. It should go to that Monday, right?
Depending on how you calculate it, could either be tomorrow or Monday. Yes.
Or Monday. Okay.
but I don't want it to come due on a Saturday.
Got it. See, so I added 2.
Okay.
And what date are we getting? So this is sending it to Monday.
Okay. So I'm not, all right, maybe I've got to use that. I'm not using that step. I was using the other one, but maybe I got to use this one. Okay.
There's compute. Oh, what other one
That
were you
get
using?
days between.
Oh, get
and
days
doing that.
between. Okay, got it.
Okay, so let me take a look at that. Because that one wasn't making as much sense to me, but maybe I just gotta look at it more.
Okay. One thing to note, I believe these steps error out if the day, hours, and minutes are null. So you do want to put in a constant in there, or an actual value if there is one for those.
Okay, okay. All right, maybe that's what I did.
Great.
Okay, let me try that. Thanks.
Cool. Nancy, definitely reach out if you have any issues
I will.
with that. Awesome. Cool. I think we have gone through a few. Definitely will get more information about this input data for this active form flow for you guys. Hopefully we get some news around that soon. But again, thank you for joining our Lunch and Learn today. I hope everyone has a great weekend. And we'll see you on Monday. Thank you, everyone.